Hey guys, welcome to the Bad Writer channel. I'm Brandy, but I go by BL Joy, and today I'll be talking about the 7 reasons why your novel is boring. Throughout the video, you will notice that word does not roll off my tongue with ease. Please bear with me. If you prefer to read this, check out the article on my site. I'll have the link below in the description. Let me start off by saying that nothing sucks more than realizing that the book that you slaved over, the book you put your all into, is boring. No writer ever wants to hear those words. Now, if you heard them, you probably just want to brush them aside. I get it. There's been plenty of times when I read something and I thought it was boring, but other people loved it. Sometimes you're going to come across that. Everyone isn't going to like the same thing. Just about anything historical tends to bore me. I'm just not into it. I mean, I have watched and read some historical things that I've enjoyed, but they usually had to have fantasy or romance elements in them for me to actually enjoy them. But the vast majority of the time, if you ask me to read something historical, it's like watching paint dry. Though I think we all wish that was the case. That is just a matter of preference. When someone tells us that our story is boring, majority of the time, it isn't. The reason someone is telling you this is because it is in fact boring. And I'm going to tell you the reasons why and how to fix them. Reason 1, the protagonist has no goal. Your protagonist should always have a goal. It doesn't matter if the goal is as big as saving the world or as small as going to the grocery store. They should have a goal. They should have something that the readers are looking forward to. This is what helps to keep your audience attention. They want to see whether or not the protagonist achieves their goal. Also, this is helpful for you as a writer. If your characters don't have a goal, 9 times out of 10, your story is probably running around in circles. The reason is because you don't know how to get to the end of your story without knowing what your characters are trying to achieve. If you don't know, your readers don't know. And if they don't know, more than likely they are bored. The solution is pretty simple. Give the protagonist a goal. Give your readers a reason to stick with your story. Even if they are bored because of other reasons like, boring plot lines, what will keep their interest is the need to see whether or not the protagonist is going to achieve their goal. Think of the times you hated characters so much, but you kept reading until the end because you wanted to see what happened. Next, reason 2, the protagonist isn't active. This happens sometimes where we have our characters react instead of making them active. There are things happening around them or to them and they take no action. This is extremely boring. If you're wondering what that means, then let me give you an example. Think about the Hunger Games. Imagine if Katniss wasn't an active participant in the game. Imagine if she had wept or hidden behind a rock the entire time instead of taking other people down to make sure she lived to see her sister again. It's Katniss' drive to live that makes the Hunger Games interesting. We want to see characters take action. We want to root for them. But if they aren't doing anything at all, then we're bored. The way to fix this is by giving the protagonist a plan of action to achieve their goal. Also, I didn't mention this in the article when I wrote about this topic, but it's also helpful to give them motivation. Katniss could have easily accepted her fate. Most would. But because she wants to get back to her sister, she fights to stay alive. It's not because of the riches she'll receive if she does win. It's because of her sister. By giving your protagonist a plan of action, this means that they are actively taking steps to ensure they achieve their goal. This also helps for you as a writer to create scenes for the middle of your story. Reason 3, nothing is happening. We all know what it's like to read something where nothing is happening. Not only is it boring, but it's extremely frustrating because of how boring it is. We're just stuck there waiting for something to happen. It's almost like the story has paused despite the fact that there are still chapters left. I think of it like this. Imagine your protagonist is running, but no matter how hard he's running, he's not getting anywhere. Why? Because he's running in quicksand. This is what it's like reading a story where nothing is happening. Because no matter what the protagonist does, no matter the actions he takes, the plot isn't moving forward. He's stuck and we're stuck with him. I mean, just thinking about it actually annoys me. Comment below and tell me if you read or seen anything like this before. Now, remember one thing. Every scene in your story should either do 2 things: push the plot forward or show character development. If it doesn't do either of these things, then get rid of it. I don't care if someone is dying or cars are exploding. Don't bog your story down with useless things. This is how I make sure I don't fall prey to doing this, because honestly, it's quite easy to do so. As writers, we get so attached to the scenes we have written that we have a hard time letting them go. I had to cut scenes before because I realized it didn't push my plot forward. That's why I recommend jotting down a note next to each chapter and asking yourself a simple question. What is the purpose of this chapter? If you find that it has no purpose, or it has the same purpose as a previous chapter, then get rid of it. If you take it out and your story doesn't fall apart by doing so, then it definitely didn't need to be there. Reason 4, there are no stakes. What will your characters stand to lose if they don't achieve their goal? Will they lose their life, one of their family members, their friends, their self-respect, their dignity? If they don't stand to lose anything, why do we care? Why would we care if they achieve their goal? Because if they don't, they'll be sad? That's not good enough. The solution to this is really easy. Make sure the protagonist is affected by the goal he or she is trying to achieve. Make sure there are consequences to their actions if they don't achieve them. Just like reason number 1, this will keep your readers interested until the end. They want to see what happens if your character doesn't achieve their goal. The more personally connected this goal is to your character, the better. So even if nothing is happening, if the stakes are high, the readers will stick with the story to the end. Or at least they'll skip to the end. Still, they read it. Reason 5, no conflict. If you don't have conflict in your story, then you don't have a story. As simple as that. It's so important that you have conflict within your story, because without it, it's like watching paint dry. This is why you need secondary characters and why you should make sure they are just as interesting as the protagonist. Don't skimp out on character development with secondary characters. They will be the reason the protagonist is an interesting character. I want you to remember this. Every character has a moral code, a way they view the world, and the rules they live by within that world. Other characters around them have different opposing moral codes. They view the world differently from the protagonist. If you have 2 different characters who have opposing views of the world, this will ultimately create conflict. They will butt heads because they don't live by the same moral code. The reason why conflict is so important is because it makes your story good. Without it, it's like eating stale bread. Without it, your protagonist easily achieves their goal. Boring. Without it, they won't have a reason to change. Boring. No conflict equals a boring story. Reason 6, the characters are boring. Sometimes the problem isn't the story, it's just your character. And if your character is boring, then your story is boring. Your character is the one navigating the story. It's the character the readers are following. So if the protagonist is boring, or worse, all of the characters are boring, it doesn't matter if the plot is good or not. We'll be bored to death. One thing I recommend is looking at all the characters in your story. Everyone isn't meant to be a protagonist because some characters simply aren't interesting enough. Sometimes the protagonist you have shouldn't be the one navigating the story, and it should be another character. But let's say you want to keep the same protagonist, or all of your characters are boring. Start by giving them strengths and weaknesses. I know we're afraid that our character will be unlikable, but it's better than Mary and Gary Sue. Besides, if you have a nice balance, your character won't be unlikable. Don't be afraid to make your characters flawed and layered. These are the characters that stick with people. These are the characters that don't make you want to fall asleep while reading their story. And last but not least, reason 7, poor execution. You don't know how many times I've read or watched something and thought to myself, had they told the story a different way, it would have been more interesting. The plot might be a good idea, but it never comes down to the idea. It comes down to execution. Poor execution will make even the greatest idea the most boring story ever told. That's why it's very important that during the brainstorming process, you explore your idea to its fullest extent. It's the difference between you making a great story or a bad one, the difference between you writing a few drafts or multiple ones. Trust me when I say that replotting is no fun. Remember, execution is always key. When it comes down to story, you don't get graded on an idea, but what you've actually written. As for a way to fix this, ask yourself if the story can be told another way. Ask yourself if you need a new protagonist, or if your protagonist needs a new goal. Maybe the subplot needs to be changed. Sometimes everything needs to be changed. I won't lie, that sucks. But that's why it's best to plan these things out in the beginning. Otherwise, you'll be writing something you'll later throw in the trash. This is why I'm a planner. Otherwise, I will write myself into holes and never finish. Well, that's it for today's video, you guys. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it or learned something helpful. Please subscribe and comment below. I would love to hear your thoughts. I'll be posting weekly from now on. If you want more writing tips, go to badwriterclub.com. Check out the latest posts and sign up to become a bad writer. See you next week.